You know, I don't think many people were excited for the launch of the GameCube to be missing the expected Mario title, and I think even less were thrilled for the replacement to be a game starring Luigi as he catches ghosts with a vacuum. But I sure was. I was basically giddy when I got to plug my GameCube in for the first time and play Luigi's Mansion in 2001. Still to this day, I enjoy giving this game a quick playthrough. It is so easy and satisfying to do a run, and while Luigi's Mansion 3 was a great follow-up on everything that made this original so fun in my mind, I prefer the original over the sequel on 3DS, and I think it still has enough merit to be held up with the more expansive third entry. So basically right out of the gate, I've told you I think this is a gem for the GameCube and should still be cherished, but I'll be the first to admit some of that may be rose-tinted glasses, and it certainly isn't perfect. But first, let's take a step back. Released on September 14th in Japan, November 18th, 2001 in the US, and May 3rd, 2002 in Europe, Luigi's Mansion was part of the launch lineup for the GameCube. It was the big Nintendo franchise at launch until Super Smash Bros. Melee and the soon-to-be classic Pikmin came quickly after. This spooky game about a haunted mansion appropriately opens with Luigi walking through a creepy, twisted forest with only a flashlight to aid his journey. Boy is Luigi in for a surprise when this obviously sketchy mansion turns out to be a trap that is filled with ghosts. This is when we're introduced to Professor Elvin Gadd, or for the proper pun, EGAD for short. He saves Luigi with his crazy vacuum before he was almost destroyed by those cute little orange ghosts. After the tiny old professor fails to really catch the ghosts, we finally get some real backstory on what is going on here. Basically, Luigi has come looking for a mansion he won in a contest that he didn't enter. Turns out, Gadd has lived in these woods his whole life, and the mansion has only just recently appeared and was full of ghosts. Seems like a weird plan to build a mansion full of ghosts right next to a guy who has spent his whole life catching ghosts. But I guess it makes slightly more sense when you take the fact that Gadd had his own collection of ghosts that he had caught and they've now been released into the mansion. But the big plot twist is that Mario came through before you, and the professor never saw him return. Yes, in case you didn't know, this is technically the second Mario is Missing title, but this time, instead of running around learning about history, you're a Ghostbuster, which is a way better concept by default. Anyway, to save his brother, Luigi suits up with a vacuum, actually called the Poltergust 3000, and learns how to suck up some ghosts. The original controls on the GameCube are a treat, mostly thanks to the amazing controller. You'll only hate these controls if you hate inverted look aiming, which you'd be wrong anyway. The left shoulder functions in reverse, blowing out air, which is useless until later. The basic premise is Luigi needs to shock the ghost with the light from his flashlight, then, while they're stunned, suck them up until their heart meter reaches 0 by pulling in the opposite direction. Back in the mansion, Luigi will begin his search for Mario while trying to get rid of all the ghosts he can. The foyer introduces the concept that with the lights on, you're safe, and it's here that we meet our first Toad to save the game. Making an appearance in a similar manner as Super Mario 64, all Toads will give you a hint or a story bit and then save the game for you. Back in the first room, where we met EGAD, Luigi doesn't seem to have much to do, but once you manage to get all the candles blown out, you get a fun cutscene to drive home that dark is a dangerous concept. Once you clear the room of ghosts, the lights come on and a chest appears with a key. That is basically your main path through this entire game. Luigi will go room to room clearing out ghosts and turning on the lights. This in turn either clears a blockade, gives you a key, or just moves things along in some way. This is a very linear affair with needing to go room from room catching any ghosts that spring up. Things get a little less straightforward as you progress, but don't expect to make any big, impactful decisions. Luigi runs into a fun little selection of standard ghosts in the darkness of the mansion. You're quickly introduced to the main cast of them with the orange, pink, and then green variety. They all mostly just charge, or to be more accurate, float at you and then attempt to punch you when they get close. The big green guy, who I can only assume is the ghost of Donkey Kong, throws bananas all around in hopes of making you slip. A few others do try some other tactics, such as trying to grab onto you or causing big waves of splash damage. There are some lesser ghosts in hallways that will throw bombs and such as well. There is also one ghost that just runs away and gives you money and jewels if you manage to catch it. More on the money later. The mansion is broken up into sections, and as you slowly clean the rooms out, you'll eventually get the key to unlock a room with the portrait ghosts. This is where things get a little shaken up. These are the ghosts from Gadd's collection, and they don't interact with Luigi straight away. The other tool Luigi has, the Game Boy Horror, which up until the first portrait ghosts have been used as a map in a video phone, has another feature, where you can scan a ghost and learn a bit about them. You'll use this to figure out how to get the ghosts aggravated to expose their heart so you can shock them with your flashlight. After you manage that, the rest is the same as before, at least early on. They just have more life and more fight in them and drop those pearls during the struggle. Usually after a few of these lesser portrait ghosts, you'll move on to the boss ghosts for the area. The first part of this remains the same, solve a little mini puzzle so you can start the fight. With the boss ghosts though, you'll be warped to a much larger battle arena. There's lots more to dodge, and this feels the most Super Mario in scope. For this first fight with the now giant baby, you'll want to suck up the right bouncy ball and fire it back at him, a mechanic that will get repeated a few times through the game. But the concept remains largely the same. Dodge whatever that crazy spook throws at you and suck them up when you get them stunned. After these big fights, the professor will have you come back to the lab as your Poltergust is bursting at the seams with ghosts. You'll be returning all the portrait ghosts back to their portrait form by using Professor Egad's handy ghost portrification machine. This is where the pearls they dropped come in handy, and the more you picked up, the better their frame will be. You'll also deposit all your cash and jewels to start tallying up your total score for the game. Heading back into the mansion, you'll be introduced to the two final mechanics of the game. This is one of the problems I mentioned that the game does have no matter how much I love it. It shows its whole hand pretty early on. Anyway, the first thing we should talk about is what happens when Luigi finds himself in this hidden room and we have him push this alluring hidden red button. Yes, unsurprisingly, the already established ghost baddies of the entire Mario series make an appearance in a game where Luigi has to bust ghosts. These more sneaky ghosts operate a bit different than what we've seen so far. As Egad explains, they are way more shy than all the other ghosts we've been running into, a behavior which fits comfortably into the Mario universe. So you want to turn on the lights before trying to catch any boos. Once you do, you'll follow a now unlocked meter on your Game Boy Horror that has a steady green light when the room is clean, yellow when a boo is hiding, and blinks red when you're close. After shaking some furniture around, you'll begin your tangle. The boos don't have an exposed heart like the other ghosts, and with the lights on, they're already weakened, so you just need to suck them up. But they aren't pulled in as much as the other ghosts either. You need to keep draining their energy while trying your best not to let them escape. This is pretty easy at first, but later on in the game, expect to get frustrated pretty fast while you chase them between rooms as they have a large amount of energy towards the end. It becomes pretty tedious, honestly, especially if they enter a room or hallway that is still dark. Their energy drains super slow when the lights aren't on. You have 50 boos to find in total before the final boss can be fought, so you might be a little frustrated towards the end. At least all their punny names are good for a laugh the whole time, if you're into that sort of thing. At this time, you can also unlock the first elemental power by collecting the fire coin. You'll also eventually get water and then ice as expected. This is where that blow mechanic comes into play on the left trigger I mentioned. Half trigger blows out a steady stream of fire, water, or ice, and a full click shoots out a large ball. From here, you'll start having elemental ghosts that have to be weakened with their opposite element. Fire beats ice, water beats fire, and so on, with puzzles to solve as well on occasion. This is basically how you'll play the rest of the game for the next several hours through the mansion. There are a few little new puzzles and hidden things to figure out, but the meat of the game is basically settled right after the first boss, leaving you without any real surprises from here outside of a few story elements. Though I don't think many of those will be surprising either. You'll either appreciate this as everything getting out of the way of the game, or you'll find it kind of dull. With this approach and the shorter game length, it made a lot of sense to me when the sequel was announced for 3DS. It certainly fits the on-the-go structure. That just had its own issues. But it was a great idea when they ported this game to the 3DS. The rest of the game is much heavier on portrait ghosts, or at least there are less regular rooms with ghosts between each one. A few are optional, but there really isn't any benefit to skipping any of them unless your goal is to run through the game as fast as possible. I appreciate how each of them have a distinct personality, even the ones that are optional or have a little more basic setup. Some of my favorites are Melody, who has this awesome room of instruments. Activate them all and get a fun rendition of the Super Mario theme with each of those instruments represented. She also quizzes you on a few Super Mario songs, and your fight is her playing a ghostly sonata while sheets of music attack you. Mr. Lugs, while optional, I enjoy how the fight is structured, with the ghost butlers and him shooting fire until he wears himself out. It's charming in an odd way. Though it's a bit bombastic in the lead up to him, the find them in the right box scenario can be annoying, I do like the personality that went to Henry and Orville and their toy car and plane-based fight. Vincent Van Gogh is a fun encounter as well, with having to fight all his ghostly paintings as they spring to life round to round. The inclination being that his paintings are the cause of all the ghosts in the mansion. It is a fun endgame challenge with having to fight waves of each level of standard ghosts and then their creator. Of course, we can't forget about Madame Clairvoyant. We get to interact with this bit of a stereotype a few times, each with a dramatic fortune-telling and contacting the spirits of the house. It can be a bit repetitive, but I've always personally enjoyed the character. She is the only Poltergust to have a major side quest in the game. Early on, you'll come across one of Mario's belongings, and you'll need to find all 5 of them before she'll turn herself over so you can suck her up. It is a bit nitpicky, but I've always found it strange that despite her giving up, she'll still try to fight against the Poltergust 3000, and that 3 of the items you find are clothes, a hat, shoe, and glove. But Mario's definitely still wearing all those while captured. Of course, not all the Poltergusts are good. Some do fall a bit flat or just seem like filler. Uncle Grimly is a great example of this, who requires a trek all the way back through a completely dark mansion after lightning knocks out all the lights, and he doesn't have anything very interesting about him once you get there. Probably the worst offender is Boolossus. Nothing against the majority of the battle or the concept for this boss, but it can be a chore to get through, and it's never consistent. Basically, Boolossus is a giant boo, obviously, formed out of a bunch of other boos. You need to get Boolossus over to the conveniently placed unicorn statues so you can pop him. Then you need to freeze each of the tiny boos and suck them up. Again, fine in concept, but the boos can fly out of the arena, and they do so very bombastically. Once you get down to just a few left, it is a major chore to bait them to stay in bounds so you can whip around and freeze them. It can just drag on and on trying to catch the final boos. Alright, there will be a little bit of endgame spoilers for a minute. If you like going in fresh to a game no matter how old, I understand that, so skip ahead to the wrap up. Circling back a bit, you figure out Mario's fate pretty early on. Once you find your way out to the back of the mansion, you might hear a familiar voice, and climbing down the well reveals Mario is trapped in a painting hanging on an altar. You get a glimpse of his captor then as well. This, with the items quest for Madame Clairvoyant, starts filling out the story and what is going on in the mansion. Turns out King Boo, who is who you got a glimpse of in that well, has been behind everything and maybe Bowser? King Boo has Mario trapped in that painting, and you can get to him a little more than midway through, but since all the other Boos are giving him strength, you can't get to Mario until you capture all the Boos. Once you do though, you get to face off against the big baddie in charge. Could this be where Bowser comes in that Madame Clairvoyant mentioned? Well, yes and no. It is just King Boo in a giant Bowser suit. This was an interesting decision to me, and honestly a bit of a disappointing one, even on my first playthrough. I enjoy this not being a traditional Mario game, and shoving Bowser in there seemed like a lazy option for the final boss fight. It isn't necessarily a bad final boss fight, just not a great one overall. When King Boo is in the suit, he does standard Bowser things, like trying to make a giant leap and squish you, charge at you, breathe fire, and throw spikes at you. The spike balls bring back a familiar mechanic by this point, and you need to launch those at the Bowser suit to knock off his head and get King Boo out. From there, you just suck him up like any other Boo. He's basically defenseless. Well, except that the Bowser head floats around shooting fireballs at you. You repeat this a few times until you can suck up King Boo for good and claim his crown as your prize. The ending is a cute one, as we see Luigi snap back into reality and grab the painting of a tuckered out Mario and rush back to the lab. EGAD then tells you this all only took one night, which is kinda true, as you can beat this game rather quickly. We then cue another portification scene in the reverse mode to free Mario. Luigi has a cute crying laugh at his dazed brother, and that is a wrap.
Mamma mia. Oh, oh, oh,
So that's Luigi's Mansion. All your cash, gems, and pearls get tallied up and give you a ranking. Based on that ranking, you get a mansion all your own in all of its big green glory, if you got enough cash. After this, there's a hidden mansion, which weirdly in the US, that is just a harder mansion with ghosts having more health and doing more damage. You also have a stronger Poltergust 3000 as well, and these two things combined make it easier for you to get better frames on the second run. But in the POW regions, the mansion is also reversed. There are more ghosts, harder ghosts show up earlier, the levels are a lot darker, and boos are just super speedy. Basically, POW regions got Luigi's Mansion Nightmare mode, and the US got just a bit more of a challenge that feels kind of pointless. You know, Luigi's Mansion is a fantastic game. Sure, it's really short and linear, some of the bosses are kind of flat, and some of the later game boos can be a chore, but there isn't much to hate on here. Visually, it has aged very well, especially if you play this in progressive mode either on a Wii or GameCube with better cables. I remember people complaining about Luigi's flashlight clipping and petty things like that, but personally the lighting in this game blew me away in 2001, and I still think it looks pretty good. Some of the design elements are just really nice as well. I love the nod to the already established survival horror genre with Luigi slowly opening doors, and the little cutscene looks really nice, and the same goes for the other cutscenes as well. I also much prefer the ghost designs in this game over the 3DS sequel, and even still Luigi's Mansion 3. They just fit better in the Mario universe in my opinion. There's also just a lot of silly humor and personality here. I always like playing as Luigi in the classic games, but this game really made me like Luigi as a character. We also have to talk about the lovely sound design. You can't be done with a video of Luigi's Mansion without at least mentioning how he whistles and hums the theme song during the entire game, or his calls for his brother Mario. And I love that as your health goes down, Luigi starts to whimper a bit as he does both of those. It's so endearing.
Mario! Mario!
If you knew nothing about the game, you probably at least knew about that. But the score is lovely as well, and they were smart in using ambience instead of just a constant stream of level themes and the like. It really plays to the horror side of this game. It is really worth a try, and if you want a hard copy, you have two options. You can grab a GameCube disc for your GameCube or backwards compatible Wii for about 40 bucks. But there is also the option of the 3DS remake for a little less than 30. There were some changes, but the core experience is still mostly untouched.